رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال ثوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
Please recite another salawat. Please welcome Dr. Shakil Virji to the member with a loud salawat.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. والصلاة والسلام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين واللعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. أما بعد، قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتاب مبين والقرآن المجيد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. من كفر بالله من بعد إيمانه إلا من أكره وقلبه مطمئن بالإيمان ولكن من شرهب الكفر صدرا فعليهم غضب من الله ولهم عذاب عظيم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآله. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are commemorating today the anniversary of the Shahaadah, the death anniversary of our sixth holy Imam, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq, alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. When we go and study the life of our sixth Imam, there is a lot that one can extract from his life, so much so that if we were to discuss a lot of these things in detail, it would take more than one half-an-hour majlis. So as I was reading, it became a challenge or a task for me to decide what should I talk about our sixth Imam, what qualities of our sixth Imam that I should talk about, especially in trying to choose something that is relevant for human behavior today, in today's world, and to try and see how our Imam, addressed this situation. A little bit of background. Our sixth Imam was born in 83 AH, and 61 AH was Muharram, the day of Ashura, occurred in 61 AH. So it's about roughly a little less than 20 years after the day of Ashura in Karbala that our Imam was born. And he lived the first 15 years of his life under his grandfather, Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salatu wassalam. And one would imagine that in the families, there is a discussion always, and I'm sure our fourth Imam must have spoken about what happened in Karbala, what happened with his father, and how the day of Ashura was probably, how difficult that day was for Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wassalam. And then they were still living in the era of the Banu Umayyah. The Banu Umayyah were the caliphs at that time. If you look at the span of our sixth Imam, he lived during the time of the 5 Banu Umayyah caliphs, from Hisham Abdul Malik, till the end, and 2 of the Banu Abbas caliphs. So he lived through 7 of these caliphs, the end of the Banu Umayyah and the beginning of the Banu Abbas. And it became a situation where one of the things that happened after Muharram, after the day of Ashura, that people became awakened, and there was the beginning of the uprising against the Banu Umayyah at that time. Now, a lot of people, when they study the history of the Imams, they ask some questions. For example, one of the questions that is being asked is, why did Imam Hassan alayhi salam choose to make a peace treaty with Muawiyah? And why did Imam Hussein alayhi salam rise up and actually had the whole incident of Karbala happen? And then you come to Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, things are a little bit quiet because he suffered Karbala, he came back to Medina, and he lived in Medina for a few years. And then Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam became the Imam, and then after that Imam Sadiq. And during this period of time, when people were rising up, the Imams, Imam Baqir alayhi salam and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, were approached by the people. And they were told by people that, look, we hate living under this oppression of the Banu Umayyah, and we want to stand up and fight. And they would cite the example of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and say, we want to be like that, we want to rise up, we want to fight. Yet you find that Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam refused. They did not want to participate. It's not that they remained quiet about this. They were vocal about their refusal to join the son of Imam Zain al-Abidin, Zayd bin Ali, who rose up with an army and was later martyred by the Banu Umayyah in Yemen. When Zayd approached the Imams refused, said, no, we don't want any part of this. There were others who rose up and they came to the Imams. In fact, they were so upset at Imam Ja'far Sadiq, Imam Muhammad Baqir, for not joining them in their military aspect of going against Banu Umayyah, that they, to some degree they even went against them, against the Imams. So this was the situation there. And then when we start thinking about it, if you look at the history of all of the 12 Imams, there was only one Imam who rose up in the way Imam Hussein alayhi salam rose in Karbala. Imam Ali alayhi salam was the Khalifa at the time, and he was involved in the military campaign that was necessary. But all the other Imams did not rise up in that way. Does that mean that Imam Hussein alayhi salam did something different from the other Imams? No. There is a time and a place for everything. And the way our Imams judge, now I am not obviously qualified to go into the minds of the Imam and try to think how they were thinking. But from what happened in history and listening to some of the ulama and reading about it, you come to this conclusion that not every situation of oppression requires a Karbala. Because you try to do what is best for your people and for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the time when it is needed. I'll tell you something, that the number of ahadith that are quoted by Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam is more than 30,000 ahadith, is more than the ahadith of all the Imams combined. This is the fact. That Imam Ja'far, the sixth Imam, during that time that he was the Imam and during his reign, taught the people to the degree that there are more than 30,000 ahadith that are cited by Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. So he decided, or whatever the circumstances were, that it was more important to make people aware of the deen of Allah than to rise up. The circumstances around him dictated that that should happen. And the other thing was that those people that came in, not Zayn bin Ali, but some of the others that came to Imam Sadiq to join them in their military campaign against Banu Umayyah, you know, and especially the Abbasid people, Imam said, these are not from me. Because there is a distinction between being an Imam and being a Khalifa. An Imam is a representative of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his mission is different than a political leader of the Muslim Ummah. This is the role of the Caliph. A Caliph, you know, an Imam could be a Khalifa, like Imam Ali alayhi salam was. But a Caliph does not have, you know, Imamat and Khilafat are two separate entities, and this was a point that Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam emphasized to the highest degree, you know, whenever, you know, these discussions came along. Now, I mean, there's so much information. I'm trying to try and summate this. His imamat was a span of about 34 years, Imam Ja'far Sadiq. Total imamat was about 34 years. And I just said that part of it was the end of the Banu Umayyah, and part of the beginning was part of the beginning of the Banu Abbas was the time that Imam, you know, was the Imam during those times. Now they say that the reason why the Imam was able to, and they had Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam had 4,000 students that were going to him. Okay, and there is a location, or there used to be a location in Medina where we used to go and do ziyarat, where the school of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam used to exist. And it is said there were 4,000 students that used to go there. How did he manage to do that? The reason why is because the Banu Umayyah were getting weak, and there was this conflict between the Banu Umayyah and the Banu Abbas and all the uprising that was occurring. It left a little room for the Imams, Imam Baqir alayhi salam and Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam, to start, you know, to spread the message of Islam and to spread it exactly the right way. Two of his students, you all know, Abu Hanifa and Malik bin Anas. The Maliki school of thought and Abu Hanifa were directly students of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam Shafi, one of the third of the scholars, was a student of Malik bin Anas, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal was a student of Imam Shafi. So if you look at it, all four schools of thought of our Sunni brothers and the Imams of all four schools of thought had something to do with Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. So he had either a direct or an indirect impact on the Muslim jurisprudence, that came about later on. Why are we known as the Ja'fari school of thought? It was because of Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam. All the jurisprudential laws that came down came because of the teachings of our sixth Imam alayhi salatu wasalam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So many would ask that we can say quite safely that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam chose a different route, made his priority something else other than military campaign against the oppressor. He left that to other people. Now, the slogan that Banu Abbas used to create their revolution, against the Banu Umayyah was what? That we are going to fight, we are going to remove Banu Umayyah, and we are going to return the Khilafat, back to the descendants of the Prophet. Because they were the descendants of the Prophet, from the Banu Abbas as the uncle of the Holy Prophet. And that is the descendancy that took advantage of that. When people went and joined Banu Abbas, they had the idea that they were going to create a revolution, and after the revolution, the Khilafat was going to be handed to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam again was approached and he says, no, that's not what I want. One of the reasons why we see that later on when the Banu Abbas came into power, they started to kill brutally all of the people who had allied with them or who were in alliance with even the military campaigns from different parts of the Muslim nation to join against, to join against in the revolution against the Banu Umayyah, because they didn't want any rivalry even from those people who were in favor of the Ahlul Bayt. They started killing them mercilessly. In fact, there is an incident that is quoted in Basra where a multitude of people were burnt to death by the Banu Abbas. Why? Because they didn't want any rivalry. They wanted the power all to themselves. So Imam alayhi salam did not want to be associated with these people, because had he joined them, then all the actions of the Banu Abbas, I'm assuming, would have been, targeted towards him as well. But there was a real difficult issue with this relative freedom that the Imam was having to preach Islam, to bring the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how he had to deal with Banu Umayyah towards the end and the Banu Abbas. They weren't friendly with him, neither was he friendly to them. He did not necessarily agree with everything, that they said. And there was a time, and the verse that I just cited from the Holy Quran, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, is the verse that is related to Ammar Yasir regarding taqiyya. Man kafara billahi min ba'di imani, that those people who become disbelievers after they have believed, illa man akrahu wa qalbuhu mutma'inna bil iman, except for those who have faced some kind of a difficulty and have pretended sort of that they are out of the iman, but their heart is mutma'in with iman, okay, and that showing disbelief is easier for them, except for those guys. Anybody that goes from iman to kufr, there is azabun alim, according to this verse of the Holy Quran. Okay, so this verse is specifically directed to Ammar Yasir. And why? Because Ammar Yasir was being persecuted. This is early days of Islam, after his mother and father had been tortured and killed. And when Ammar was approached by the kuffar to deny Islam and to curse the Holy Prophet or to say bad things about him, he agreed to do it to save his life. Okay, this concept, known as the concept of taqiyya, was something that Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam promoted in the highest fashion. And this is one of the things that I wanted to discuss in terms of our discussion today. Remember, my dear brothers and sisters, we as human beings sometimes, either in jazbat, in emotions, okay, will react to situations around us based on impulse. Sometimes we use iman. Oh, I'm a Muslim, I'm a follower of Imam Ali, I'm a Shuja'ah, and when a situation faces, I will, without any thought, go up against other people and end up not causing good, but end up causing harm to myself. There's a very good example of this going on. There are people who ascend the mimbar in other parts of the world and speak ill of the important people of other madhabs. For example, they speak ill of the khulafa of the Ahlus Sunnah. And it's not only academic, they do it in an insulting way, in a way that when other people, when they are listening to these YouTube videos of these mullahs or these dhakirin or sometimes even the ulamas doing that, they go out and they kill and persecute other Shias in different villages. So in the emotion, they are talking about, they are doing something that they think they are doing tabarra, which is one of the tenets of our belief. But tabarra has its limits in the sense that do it with some intellect. Don't do it in a way that it comes out and the snake comes out and bites you and your community in other parts of the world. Many of our leadership, have come out and spoken against tabarra in a public kind of a way. Why? Because other people are getting harmed because of this reason. So in this kind of a situation, we need to watch out what we say. So here the Imam is sort of teaching us that yes, don't you think, I'm making this up, but the Imam we can imagine that the Imam would have said, don't you think that I was angry about what happened in Karbala? Don't you think that I was not upset with the way the Banu Umayyah and the Banu Abbas are treating me and my people? Don't you think that I don't have this shuja'ah of my grandfather Ali ibn Abi Talib and Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein and the Prophet, that I can stand up to all these oppressors and get my sword out and go out there and fight them? We can imagine Imam asking that sort of a question. But he chose not to. He chose to do something that today, remember one thing, that Imam Hussein alayhi salam chose to take arms because he did not want to give allegiance to Yazid. Look at what happened as a consequence of that. 1400 years later, we have the Maha Azad that is coming up, and we are still remembering what happened 1400 years ago because of the actions of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, selectively chosen for the right time, for the right place, and for the right reasons. That's all. Today, we are known as the Ja'afri Madhab because of the teachings of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, that he took advantage of the circumstances during his time. Sometimes, there are narrations that Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam was approached by an ally of the Banu Abbas with a fiqhi question. And Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq answered it one way. And then the same question was asked by somebody who was a believer, a follower of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq in private, and he gave that person a different answer. And both these answers are recorded in the books of Ahadith. They are contradicting each other. There are some examples, I don't want to get into it, but those answers contradict each other. That is why you have this hadith of the Imams, that they say that when you see a hadith from us that seems to be authentic, but it doesn't agree with the Quran, discard it. Don't follow it. Why would an Imam say that? The people who analyze a hadith, the ulama that analyze a hadith, when they look at the two contradictory hadiths especially from Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, they also look at the context. Where did he say it? What was going on during that time before they accept or they reject that hadith? Remember, there is one Imam, I believe it was with Imam Ja'far, Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salatu wasalam, that one of his companions was given instructions to do wudu the wrong way. Instead of wiping, he was told to wash his feet. Okay, this is against Sharia. This is not what we believe, it's also against the Quran. The Quran says, does not say aksalu, does not say wash. Quran says wipe. But Imam gives these instructions to this follower of his who lived in the palace of the caliph of that time, that do your wuzu this way. Now, if we were to accept the hadith of the Imam or the instruction of the Imam, we would all be doing the wuzu the wrong way. But that instruction was given to that person for a specific reason. Because the Abbasid Caliph, I don't remember who it was, but was inspecting the actions of this, because they suspected that this person was affiliated with the Imam. And they came to see one of the ways to identify him, whether he's a Shia, a follower of the Imam or not, was to see how he does wudu. And since he was following the wrong way of doing the wudu, they said, no, this cannot be a follower of Imam, the Imam, I think it was Imam Musa Kazim alayhi salam. So these instructions were given to people intentionally. There were some companions who would come into the majlis of the Imam in public and do salam to the Imam, and the Imam would actually not respond to them, or would respond to them in an insulting kind of a way. And he said, what's going on? Imam said, I don't want this person to be identified with me, because there is security around here watching what's happening. And if this person is identified with me, they will go and torture him. His life is going to be in danger. So that is the concept of taqiyya that Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam was spreading, for all of us. The difference, because we are accused a lot of times about taqiyya. We are told that taqiyya is lying and is against lying. No, taqiyya is not lying. Okay, taqiyya is concealing your faith. There are numerous examples in the Quran. The Mu'min al-Firaun, who was living with Fir'aun, he was doing taqiyya. There's example, for example, of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he lied to the people that he was sick, and he goes and destroys all the, an Imam lying, a prophet lying, was not lying. He was doing something for a bigger reason. And that was Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam was teaching us, that listen, you don't have to react from your visceral every time you face a problem. Think. The difference between munafiqat and taqiyya, for a munafiq pretends to be good for his own benefit, whereas somebody who is practicing taqiyya, okay, is hiding, something good, okay, either to save his or her life, or to try and gain something that is bigger and better, not for himself or herself, but for all those that are around him. That is the concept of taqiyya that Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, was teaching us. So my dear brothers and sisters, this was the practice of the Imam, that he took advantage of the situation that was there and made it a mission of his to spread the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So much so, my dear brothers and sisters, that it is one of the writers, not one of the Oriental writers in the history books that I read, and he says that it seems to me that Ja'far ibn Muhammad was more worried about teaching than writing about what he was teaching. He was not into, he let other people write about his teaching, so much so that it was the other people who ended up getting credit for the work that he was doing. And they are quoting Jabir ibn Hayyan and all of these other people that learned, that were disciples of Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, and got, credit for them. When we talk about Imam Ja'far Sadiq, we talk about him as our Imam, our sixth Imam. And there is another narration that I was reading, that the Ahlul Sunnah, claim him as well, because he was the teacher of Abu Hanifa and Malik bin Anas and so on and so forth. And he says, the Shia took him away from us. He's actually one of us. Claiming Imam Ja'far Sadiq, it just goes to show us how important and how impactful, his existence was, for the Muslim Ummah. Now, we go into other aspects of Imam's life. There is an incident, and I heard this in the lecture of Ammar Naqshwani. I'll just cite it because I could not find it anywhere in the readings. I just heard in his lecture that he says that. that there was a time, one of the Abbasids, I think it was Mansur al-Dawaniki, the last caliph, the one who assassinated Imam Sadiq. He had declared Eid. We had this Eid issue, this past Ramadan. So he had declared Eid one day before it was supposed to be declared, and by Shia fiqh. So he called Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and he asks the Imam, that when is your Eid? So Imam had to navigate this situation. And this is, again, I'm quoting from Ammar Naqshwani. Imam said he had to navigate, Ammar says he had to navigate this situation. And he says, you're the caliph. When you decide it's Eid, it's Eid. So the people who were around Imam Jafar said, Yabna Rasulullah, what's going on? I mean, according to us, Eid is tomorrow, not today. So Imam goes to him and he says that, I would rather repay this fast, okay, than have my neck under the sword of Mansur, and the impact of this being that the believers will not know how to believe Allah, will not recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That my death will result in the fact that these people will be left like yatim. They will not understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I would rather live and repay this fast at another time, but not, stay firm on the fact that today is it just to get, Mansur al-Dawaniki, angry. So in his process of playing this game with Mansur had given the order to the governor of Medina, okay, that go and see who Ja'far bin Muhammad is writing in as his successor. Because one of the strongest points of Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam, there was a point for all the Imams, but he was very vocal about this, and he said that Imamat can only come from the descendants of Ali and Fatima to Zahra salamullahi alayha. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Okay. So nobody else can have imamat. You can be a caliph, you can be a king, you can be whatever. This divine imamat can only be from the descendants of Imam Ali alayhi salam and Fatima to Zahra salamullahi. So this was condition number one. And condition number two was, an imam can only be appointed by the predecessor, the one who is before him. So a person cannot come out and declare that I am the imam. Just, it could be a son, of an imam, but cannot, unless the imam appoints, that particular person. So Mansur, told the governor of Medina, he says, look, Imam Sadiq was in his last days, or something was going on. And he says, I want you to go and see the will of Imam Sadiq. Look at what he's writing in his will and who he is appointing as his successor. And the first person on the list of his successor, go and behead him, kill him. Okay, why? Because Mansur had the idea that, that Imam would appoint the next Imam, and he wanted to shut this game down. He wanted to close this game down. So whoever he appoints, the first name that is going to be on this list, just behead him. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam had to leave a will, and he must have surmised that whatever I say is going to be dangerous for the person that I'm going to appoint. He was going to appoint Imam Musa al-Kadhim alayhi salam. So in his will, the first person that he writes as the executor of his will was who? Mansur himself, the king himself. He says Mansur al-Dawaniki is going to be the first one. And then he mentions another one, and then he also mentions his wife Hamida Khatun as the third one. And I think Imam Musa al-Kazim is number 5, on this list. So when the governor, reads the list, and he contacts Mansur, Mansur says, okay, what happened here? Did you, the governor says, there is a problem here. He says, what's the problem? He says, you are the number 1 successor on this, on this will. I can't behead you, so I can't come and challenge you. So Mansur was sort of defeated with what he intended to do. But then that also resulted in a problem for the succession of Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salam, because it became not clear. You find that the Ismaili school of thought, occurs from Ismail bin Ja'far, because people started to follow the first son, the oldest son of Imam Jafar Sadiq, even though he died while Imam Jafar was alive. And then there are two other, Hassan al-Aftah, and there's another one. There were like 4 factions that were created after Imam Jafar Sadiq. Pretty much the first time this incident happened, that they didn't know who the successor was. Although some khas people, some very, very close companions of Imam Sadiq, they were given this knowledge that after me, Imam Musa al-Kazim is going to be the next Imam after me. So the closest companions were informed privately. But on paper, Imam Jafar Sadiq could not put it, public because of the dangers of the time. So the thing that I wanted to illustrate by saying that there was Imam had to use a lot of strategy. On one hand, to bring the message, the true message of Islam, and to spread it amongst the people. On the second hand, preserve the lives of the followers of the Imam, although Shia. He needed to protect them. Because every time Hujjaj ibn Yusuf was one of those people who lived around that time, he needed to protect the people against this kind of people. So he had to do that as well, preserve the religion, and at the same time, navigate this enmity from the Banu Umayyah and Banu Abbas, that was coming against. He could not endorse them fully. At the same time, he could not go against them fully because it was going to be very dangerous for him. Despite all of the attempts of the Imam, there does come a time when Mansur al-Dawaniki orders the house of the Imam in Medina to be burnt down with the occupants of the people inside the house. So the governor orders this, and this is an incident that's been recorded, that the people go and burn, set alight, the house of Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam. With a lot of attempts, there were people inside, the families of Imam Jafar were inside the house, and they basically had to run around for safety. And in one of the Masa'ib, one of the people, he said, imagine what must have gone, because after a couple of days, somebody went to Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam, and he says, Yabna Rasulullah, the fire has been put out in your house. Why are you still crying? 2 days later, he says, one can imagine Imam Jafar Sadiq alayhi salam must have imagined that burning down of the houses was something that the Ahl Bayt alayhi salatu salam was used to. It happened to Fatimatu Zahra salamullahi alayha. It happened, on the eve of Sham-e Ghariba in Karbala. So he must have imagined what it must have been like on the day of Ashura, when the women were running from tent to tent, when the children were screaming, when the people were coming and pillaging the children. Imam must have envisioned, all of this after he had also experienced himself, the burning down of his own house. May Allah curse the oppressors, inshallah, and may He give us the tawfiq to be amongst those who are going to be the helpers to fight against this oppression, inshallah. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Please let us raise our hands and make dua. إلهي بك فاطمة وأبيها بالها وبنيها والسر المستودع فيها عدد ما حاط به علمك وبحق 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين وبحق البنين وأبو الفضل العباس بن أمير المؤمنين وبحق أنبيائك وأوليائك وأوصيائك وشهدائك وبحق أسمائك الحسنى يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله يا الله Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, we ask that this commemoration of the Imam, the thawab of this, Ya Allah, you grant it to us in the form of tawfiqat to be one of the followers and staunch followers of the Ahlul Bayt, and create love in our heart of the Ahlul Bayt, and create within us the ability to follow their teachings. Ya Allah, we ask and we pray to you to hasten the reappearance of our 12th Imam, who is going to be our savior, and through him, inshallah, we will avenge those who perpetrated all the enmity against the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam.